Thanksgiving had always been a sacred time in our family, a chance to gather, share stories, and celebrate gratitude. But that year, something was different. I could feel the tension even before stepping foot inside my sister Corinne's home. Where the gathering was being hosted, my niece, Emily, had returned from college and had taken to flaunting her newfound opinions, dripping with the arrogance of youth and self-righteousness. I had always supported her emotionally, financially, and even when others questioned her entitled attitude, I defended her. But as the family gathered around the table, passing dishes and exchanging jokes, she turned to me and with a smug tone asked, "So, are you still doing that thing you call a job?" Everyone went quiet. My so-called thing was a consulting business I had built from scratch after leaving a corporate career. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and gave me freedom. Her voice cut through. The warmth like ice. "I just don't get how you call that a career," she said, laughing, while sipping from a glass of wine I had paid for. I smiled politely, the way someone smiles when they've just been slapped. I glanced around the table, expecting anyone, to say something. But they were all avoiding eye contact. I realized that they had been listening to her. Subtle digs for a while, and no one had ever corrected her. My own sister didn't say a word. And that was the moment I knew things had to change. I didn't react that night. I let the rest of the dinner play out with the same fake warmth, forced smiles, and empty conversation that had come to define these family events. Inside, however, I was seething. I remembered every time I had sent Emily money for books, tuition, rent. I had never hesitated. Even when I was tight on funds, I prioritized her because I believed in helping family. I remembered the countless phone calls where she cried about being stressed and how I stayed up reassuring her. But now, with her newfound confidence, she saw me as nothing more than a punchline. I returned home and didn't say anything for weeks. Then came the message. Emily texted me, "Hey uncle, tuition's due soon. Can you please send it by Friday? Love you." The audacity of that message, the casual entitlement, made something click inside me. I replied simply, "We need to talk." She called instantly. I answered, calm and firm. "Emily, I've supported you all these years because I believed. You respected me. But after your remarks at Thanksgiving, I realized I've been funding someone who thinks I'm a joke." She started stammering, trying to downplay it. "It was just a joke," she said. "I didn't mean anything by it." But I wasn't buying it. "If you can mock my career at a dinner I helped pay for," I said, "you can find someone else to pay your tuition." The fallout was instant. My sister called me within the hour, furious. "How could you do that to her?" she screamed. "You know how important this semester is." I calmly replied, "Did you know how important Thanksgiving was to me? Did you hear her laugh at my life's work?" Corinne didn't have much to say to that. She tried to guilt me. "She's just a kid." But Emily wasn't a kid anymore. She was an adult who needed to learn that actions have consequences. For too long, I had been the backup plan, the emergency fund, the invisible uncle whose contributions were expected but never acknowledged. And I realized that I wasn't just enabling her, I was disabling myself. I felt liberated after that call. No more ATM mode. I started redirecting that energy and money back into myself. I took a trip I had been postponing for years. I upgraded my home office. I even hired an assistant to help with my business. And while they were scrambling to figure out how to pay tuition, I was rebuilding my self-worth. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. The moment I stopped letting guilt run my decisions, I saw who really valued me and who didn't. A month later, Emily emailed me a long message. "No hey uncle this time." Just a carefully worded apology. She wrote about pressure, peer influence, and how she didn't realize how hurtful her words were. It sounded sincere, but I'd heard polished apologies before. I didn't reply immediately. I waited, then I sent a reply, "Emily, thank you for your message. I appreciate your honesty, but trust isn't repaired by words alone." It's rebuilt through consistent respect. I'm open to rebuilding, but the financial support is on pause indefinitely, she replied again, asking for a second chance. But this time her tone had changed. She was humbler, more respectful, and asked about my business for the first time. It felt real. I agreed to meet her, not to talk about money, but to talk as people. We met at a quiet cafe. She looked nervous. I was calm. "Tell me," I asked, "what do you think I do?" She hesitated, then said, "You build systems to help companies grow. You solve problems others can't." I nodded. "That's closer than you were a month ago." It wasn't just about recognition, it was about being seen. For the first time in years, I felt like Emily was seeing me not just as a wallet but as a person. As the weeks passed, things started to shift. Emily began texting me, not for money, but for advice. She asked about entrepreneurship. She started researching what I did and even offered to help with a project. I cautiously accepted. She handled it well, better than I expected. She showed interest, discipline, and for the first time, humility. Karen, too, softened. Her tone, she stopped defending Emily's behavior and started acknowledging her own blind spots. She even apologized for staying silent that night. "I should have said something," she admitted. That admission meant more than she knew. The dynamic in our family began to evolve. I wasn't the invisible uncle anymore. I was someone they started listening to, respecting, and learning from. It wasn't about power, it was about balance. I didn't want to hold anything over their heads. I just wanted to feel valued, and for the first time, I did. Cutting off Emily's tuition money wasn't punishment, it was a pivot. A reset. It forced all of us to re-examine what we take for granted. Emily eventually applied for a part-time job on campus. She worked at a local bookstore, managed her schedule, and learned how to budget. When she sent me a picture of her first paycheck, I felt pride I hadn't expected. "It's not much," she said, "but it's mine." That simple sentence carried more maturity than anything she had said before. I printed the photo and kept it in my office, not because of the money, but because of what it represented: growth, independence, and change. Meanwhile, my business flourished, perhaps because I finally poured into it without guilt or distraction. I started getting bigger clients. I was invited to speak at a small conference. I mentioned Emily's story anonymously, and the audience resonated. Many had been in similar situations, family members who mocked, belittled, or took them for granted. The story struck a chord. One man came up afterward and said, "Thank you. I needed to hear that. I've been funding disrespect too." That moment confirmed I wasn't alone. By the next Thanksgiving, everything felt different. We gathered again, same house, same table, but this time, the energy was grounded. Emily sat beside me. She toasted, not to herself, but to family. "I used to think I knew everything," she said, "but I had a lot to learn. And I'm grateful to those who didn't give up on me, even when I didn't deserve their support." The whole table clapped, some with tears in their eyes. My eyes met Karen's, and she nodded with a quiet apology in her gaze. That evening, as we all sat sipping coffee and sharing stories, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. I had found my voice, not by shouting, but by choosing silence where words failed and action where talk was cheap. Emily still had a long way to go, but she was walking the right path now, and she was doing it on her own legs. That Thanksgiving became a turning point not just for our family, but for me as a man. I had learned the value of boundaries, of saying enough when enough had been exceeded for too long. I learned that financial support without emotional respect is exploitation, not generosity. And most importantly, I learned that real transformation doesn't always require anger. Sometimes it just requires stepping back. Emily finished college with honors, not because I paid her way, but because she found her own reason to finish. And years later, when she launched her own business, she invited me as the keynote speaker. On stage, she introduced me by saying, "This is my uncle, the man who taught me that support is earned, not owed, and that the best lessons come from the hardest truths." The applause was thunderous, but it was her words that echoed in my heart. I had come full circle, from being mocked to being honored, and in that circle, I found more than respect. I found myself.